Hello, everyone. I'm Pedro A. Guerrero, co-founder of the Alumni Society and founding member of Angeles Investors. I want to welcome all of you to the Stanford edition of our Wealth Creation series, developed in partnership between the Alumni Society and Angeles. The Alumni Society was founded to bring together successful leaders who shared both a cultural affinity and the distinction of having graduated from one of the country's top universities. The belief was that by aligning around these commonalities, we could establish meaningful connections that could serve as a catalyst for advancement, both for the individual and Latinos collectively. That is also behind the idea of the Alumni Society's partnership with Angeles. Our organizations have a shared mission of coming together to support Latinos, and in the case of Angeles, to pool our capital and invest in Latino founders. The purpose of our Wealth Creation series is to hear from successful leaders in our shared networks to learn about their life journeys, relationships with wealth, and investment strategies so we can grow together. We hope you find today's conversation valuable, that you continue to be engaged with the Alumni Society, and that you join Angeles. So here's our agenda for today. First, you will hear from our panelists, Victor Arias and Hernan Saenz, who are members of the Alumni Society and alumni of Stanford University. They will engage in a conversation about their life journey, perspectives on wealth with our host, Beatriz Acevedo. Then we'll deep dive into building generational wealth and investment strategies. We'll then open it up to a Q&A. After the Q&A, Jorge Pastrana from Angeles will close out the program. With that, I'd like to introduce Beatriz Acevedo. Beatriz is the co-founder and CEO of Suma Wealth, a leading fintech company devoted to increasing prosperity, opportunity, and financial inclusion for young Latinos via culturally relevant financial products, services, and content. She's also the president of the Acevedo Foundation. The Acevedo Foundation empowers the next generation of Latino leaders by creating equitable access to capital, closing the educational gap, and promoting economic mobility and inclusion. Additionally, Beatriz is also the co-founder and co-chair of LA Collab, a Hollywood initiative aimed at doubling Latino representation in Hollywood, both in front and behind the camera by 2030. Beatriz, nice to see you. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Pedro, and thank you everybody for being here. Let's get this dialogue going about a very important topic that is very close to my heart on how we should all be thinking of building wealth in our community. We are so represented, so well represented in numbers, as we all know, and we saw from the census. But I would love for that representation to be more than the numbers. And also, I would love for us to start thinking on how we transform our economic power, that we know we have plenty, and how much we contribute to this country's GDP. And think of ourselves not only as consumers, which we know we are incredible consumers, but also as investors. And this is the talk that we're going to have today. How do we get started? How do we do this? What are the first steps that we need to be taking? And we have two incredible panelists that I am excited to get to talk to and absolutely learn from. We have, and I'm going to let them talk about their life journey. So I'm just going to very quickly do very small introductions on them. But Hernan Saenz is a partner at Bain & Company Dallas office. He leads Bain's global performance improvement practice, which focuses on cost transformations and operational excellence. He's also a leader in the firm's strategy and organization practices. Welcome, Hernan, and I'm going to go with you in a second. Victor Arias Jr., who I met through LBAN, to the Latino Business Action Network at Stanford. I am a very proud graduate of cohort number 7. Victor Arias Jr. boasts more than a decade of executive recruitment experience gained through working at several of the world's most prominent search firms. So I welcome you both, Hernan and Victor, for being here. I know we'll all get to learn a lot from your life experiences, and I'd love to just dive in. Tell us a little bit about your life journey. What has it been like? And did you grow up talking about money, talking about finances? Was this something in your sobremesa, in your after dinner conversation? Or how is it that you learned the importance of wealth building? Anybody who wants to go first?
I think I'll start off first. Beatriz, it's so good to see you again. I enjoy seeing you. I see all your good work in our community, and I'm proud to have you also as a alum of the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative. So thank you for that. Also, thanks to Pedro for all the work he's done with Alumni Society, and all the other work that he's done in our community. So, so my life story. I'm a first generation Mexicano-Americano, parents, grandparents, hundreds of tios, hundreds of tias and cousins, um, and but from Mexico originally, from Chihuahua and Zacatecas. And just to sort of answer your question, there was very little discussion about wealth creation, any of that, because I think at the stage that we were at, it was really about survival, and it was about just sort of how do you plan to do the next thing and to build on what they had already created. So, my dad never finished high school. He went off to the service. He lied about his age, like many did. My mom did finish, but never went to college, although she really aspired to do that. I am the oldest of five siblings. First language was Spanish growing up. Lots of Mexican customs and traditions right there on the Rio Grande in El Paso, Texas. And at the time, the river was kind of invisible. And but I did grow up with incredible values, respect for others. Remember, my grandmother, who lived literally half a mile from the crossing, she always had food and clothes ready for the migrantes that would come knock on her door, and she would always feed them and clothe them. I just learned a lot about from her. Hard work. My dad worked two jobs. He worked for the railroad, graveyard shift, and then worked as a salesman. I hardly ever saw him. Pobrecito. I mean, I just value everything that he did, the sacrifice. We had a strong faith. The third value is just about that there is a greater good. And then the fourth thing is familia. And so familia is really strong, and you take the good with the bad with familia. So it's really about how you operate in society, really in general. So I went to Catholic schools, including high school, and then went to UTEP, Texas, El Paso, scholarships there, both athletic and scholastic, but really had no advice. It was just sort of expected. And I did meet my wife there. We now have three grown children. I have two sons and a daughter, and then two grandchildren, two boys. And so just really proud of that. So I'm going to interject here the value of Angeles, and it's very appropriate for Angeles investors. Angels in our lives. I mean, I don't kid myself about where my success has come from. And, the biggest group of Angeles has been my family, my dad, my mom, my sisters, my incredible wife, and my kids. I mean, that is the biggest group of Angeles that I've had to help, keep me going. But I will mention one, a guy named Art Gonzalez. He was from Tucson originally. He worked at the bank that I worked at, and I was working as a secretary there because I didn't have any more spring football to do, and I just needed to get some money. I took a secretarial job for a lady that was going on maternity leave. I didn't care, and but at some point during my time there, I got a call from Stanford University, said you've been accepted to the business school, and so I told my boss, who was incredulous. He goes, the one in California? I said, yes, that one. And so he then told the bank president, Art Gonzalez, who called me into his office, and he asked me lots of questions. He said, he was trying to really get permission to give me advice. And so I gave him my story, and I told him I can defer for up to 2 years. He goes, you're going to defer for 2 years, he told me. And he goes, I'm pulling you out of the credit department and I'm putting you into the management training program. Then he called in a guy and gave him a check for $500 and said, please take Victor across the street to buy himself a couple of suits. And he looked down and goes, and some shoes. And so that was my journey out of the credit department into the management training program. All that just helped me at my experience at Stanford. It just unbelievable. So, and I just talked to him today. He is my angel.
That's
and
amazing.
So, yeah, thank you. Other angel that I will mention was Emily Canales, and she was visiting UTEP at recruiting for Stanford. And she's the one that really pushed me to apply because I had really not even thought about it. I was just planning on going to University of Texas at Austin for business school. And so she's the one that really pushed me. I'll tell you one quick story about Stanford to show about the adjustments that we have to make. First day, I'd driven to Stanford, sight unseen. I got there a day too early because I couldn't move into my dorm. And so I was with two other young people that were undergrads. And so we basically broke into one of the row houses. I used my El Paso skills to kind of jimmy a window. And so we got in, we found our lodging for the night. And so it was great. The next day went to the courtyard for a wine and cheese reception. That meant a lot of things for a young guy from El Paso. And so I went in my best sweatsuit, velour sweatsuit.
I love it.
and so I'm kind of slinking around looking at people dressed up really differently. And so I met a guy and he said he was from Iowa. He worked at Chase Bank in New York. I said, oh, wow, yeah, I worked for a bank in El Paso. Real similarities, right? And so then he took me over to his friends in the middle of the courtyard to meet them. They were nice people, and they were all dressed very, very preppy back then. I didn't know what preppy meant at the time. And but the last guy that I kind of met, tall, 6'4", sandy blonde guy with boat shoes, as I call them, or topsiders. I was taught that was a word. And then with thick brown corduroy pants. He wore two Izod shirts with the collars up, and then he wore the mandatory sweater over his shoulders. And I went up to him and I said, "Hi, nice to meet you." And I said, "You have the collars up on your shirt. Let me put them down for you." So I went up behind him and I turned his collars down, and I could tell by the back of his neck he was very upset about it. And so that guy didn't talk to me for 2 years.
Wow.
But the other people, they thought I had these great, all this great courage to do that. And they became instant friends and just long life friends from that point forward. But it's those kind of situations where you have to sort of bob and weave. And so that was kind of my Stanford story. The final angel is Diana Natalicia from Stanford, University of Texas, El Paso, who is a phenomenal woman who made you think about the strengths of where you come from. And so she instilled pride, and she instilled a tremendous amount of good there. So look, I'm incredibly blessed and fortunate, and it was built on the shoulders of my parents, my grandparents, my wife, children, and boosted by many, many Angeles. So it's appropriate to have Angeles investors as part of this.
Absolutely. Wow, what an incredible story, Victor. And I so identify with you. I'm also a border girl from a different border than you. I'm from Tijuana. So I know what it is to show up when you think like, you're at your best and not quite fitting into those rooms that we tend to be the first and the only ones. But I'm sure we all have plenty of those stories, but thank you for sharing that. And absolutely, you as much as one wants to think that we've worked hard to be where we're at, there's always somebody who has believed in you or has opened a door for you. And that's why I think the mission of Angeles is so critical, and the responsibility that we all have to open doors every single day for people in our community to leave the next generation ready to go when we're not here anymore. But thank you for that story, and welcome, Hernan. How are you? We're excited to see you. Very well, thank you. We're talking about life journeys, as I'm sure you already pieced it together. And Victor was sharing some of his that were incredible. And I'm sure you have plenty that I did not get to read or see in your LinkedIn bio. So we want those that we cannot Google for you to inspire us with them.
Excellent. Well, I was raised in Costa Rica. So I feel and I am a Latino, even though I have been in the United States for 35 years. And I always tell people I am lucky that I grew up middle class, because we had enough in our house that we never had anything missing. And yet we didn't have so much that we failed to understand the nature of trade-offs. And it was a great upbringing. My first Angeles were my parents. My parents used up all of their money to educate me and my brother. And rule number one in our house was education is the gateway to opportunity. Rule number two was if you load effort on top of education, so many doors will open. And rule number three was no matter how much money you get or save or earn, save a little bit. In fact, my mother walked me into the Banco Nacional de Costa Rica at age 7 when I first opened my savings account. That was my first one. And through hard work, being educated in the right high schools, the support from my parents, I was able to get a scholarship to come study from Costa Rica to Harvard College. And Harvard, as you can imagine, was kind of shocking for this little kid from Costa Rica. But the shocks were very positive. You know, shock number one was the U.S. is very meritocratic. My roommate was the son of 2 immigrants, neither of whom spoke English. One a janitor, another a waiter. And he went on to become an attorney. And I said, in what country does that exist? The other thing that was marvelous was the work. The work ethic was celebrated as something good. You know, I always ascribed it to the Protestant background of the country. But between those two things, a society that was meritocratic and the work ethic, I decided I'm going to become an immigrant. This is going to be my home. This is where I'm going to raise my family. A second moment of luck happened at Harvard because I had to do work study. And for all of you that have done work study, it's pretty tough. They are not fun jobs. I was cleaning the toilets at the Harvard dorms. And they don't pay that much. They're close to minimum wage. And it became clear every day in my life, the power of education, the power of effort, that separation where you can create some wealth for yourself and for your family. My second angel was actually Professor James Madoff at Harvard, who said to me, go to a great university other than this one and study economics again and spend your life applying the tools of the trade. And that's how I got to Stanford. At Stanford, I did graduate work in economics. I then rounded up or rounded the rest of my training by doing an MBA at Cornell. And fascinating, I've been in the same firm for 25 years. And very few people these days can say that, right? People change a lot. I've been in the same place for 25 years. I was lucky enough to land at the combination of a place where I was reasonably good at the job and I have a lot of passion for what I do. And 2 more angels, Phyllis Yale and Chris Beerley, basically took me under their wing and mentored me. And literally, it's been 25 years. And you can imagine what 25 years means, right? I've worked everywhere in the world. It's been a very global role. I've had fascinating clients, right? I make my life out of making other people and companies successful, and that's a lot of fun. And the firm has allowed me to play many leadership roles. So it's been a very special place. The last thing about my life journey that might be interesting is I spend a lot of time in the academy. So even though I still have a full-time job, I teach at Cornell every year. And it's by a wide margin my favorite job. By the way, I wouldn't be anywhere close to anything if all of those angels that Victor mentioned in his case and that came to my life had not been present at the right time.
Absolutely. No, I think we all have them, and thank God for them for helping us get to where we are today. And again, just reiterating that we all have something to give, even if you're just starting your career or your life journey. There's somebody else that has less than you do, not necessarily financially. It could be a word of encouragement. It could be a connection. It could be a like on a social feed. It could be purchasing something from their small business. It doesn't matter. But, I think that as Latinos, as a community, we have a lot of room to grow when it comes to supporting each other and making our lives mission to open as many doors as we can, or just encouraging those next generations to be in these positions of power that we only dream that our kids get the privilege to be a part of one day. So both of your stories are incredibly inspiring. And I know this is a talk about wealth building. You mentioned a little bit that one of your angeles, who happened to be your mom, encouraged you to, or your parents encouraged you to save, and your mom took you when you were very young as a boy to open your savings account. Not a lot of families do that, right? Our communities tend to be very untrustworthy, particularly of financial institutions. If you come from countries of origin where I saw my parents at age 8 lose everything they had in a devaluation when they thought they had US dollars in their bank. Since we lived in the border, and I think, Victor, this must have happened in El Paso too, you were able to have American dollar bank accounts because everything you pay for is in US dollars, although you make pesos, which makes 0 sense. And I remember, when the president said that the valuation was at 6,000% or something crazy like that, my mom telling my dad, ay, qué bueno que tenemos el dinero en dólares. And within a second, the president turned to the TV. There was no Twitter, just saying there's no more dollars in the country. So just like that, in an instant, their net worth is completely gone. And that untrustworthy, to this day, my mom's 80 and she's like, I don't trust this guy from the bank, or I don't trust your financial advisor, and for a good reason. So I think you had an incredible head start where your parents taught you about saving and about taking you to a bank and trusting that your money would be safe there. Victor, I'm curious to hear, what were your parents' thoughts around money and saving? Or I don't know if they were insightful enough to invest. My parents were my mom was only about buying land. I think something tangible gave her a lot of security, but definitely not any other kind of investments. How was that journey of wealth building has been for you? But where did it start with your family, and where did you either start from scratch yourself, or what were the foundations that helped you where you are today?
Okay. No, thank you for that. And also, mi amigo Hernan, what a great guy. I, met him probably, I don't know how long ago it was, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And he's been an incredible inspiration to me, somebody that is an incredible driver of business, but that is incredibly principled and value driven. And so, Hernan, it's great to just share this with you.
Thank you, my friend.
Yeah. And so, this whole wealth creation thing, I think it depends on where you start on this, starting line. And I've always adhered to 2 dichos, if you will. The first one is, to whom much is given, much is expected. I remember my parents driving that into me, and because it meant something different for our family. As I said, I think it was more about survival. But, if you had some centavitos there, you had to think about what you would put in the basket for church as one thing. And so anyway, that was just a very important sort of dicho. So, it's, wherever you start, you should aspire to at least maybe get more, but knowing that you have to give back. And so that's number one. The second dicho is salud, dinero y amor, y tiempo para gozarlo. I think we've all done that toast, but it's very interesting because those are the 4 attributes of wealth that are really important. And the most important of those is the first one, that's health. Because if you don't have your health, you can't enjoy anything. And then the second one is about just the creation of wealth, and that money's important, and that financial riches are really important to reinvest in your community. That was what was driven into me. And then, love, it's critical, creating more riches and more relationships. And then time, because if you don't have time, you can't do any of that. You have to really prioritize what's really important. So I remember going to the Centro Latino, Centro Chicano at Stanford. I remember, so I was at the business school, and I remember going, and there was some bright-eyed, young freshmen or sophomore Latinos that were there. And they said, hey, Ese, what's going on, man? And so they said, oh, you're in the business school, huh? Because you're a sellout, Ese. You're a sellout. And so I sort of kind of had to think about all that. And I said, why are you a sellout? So I think it goes back to this this aversion or lack of understanding of what wealth really means to our community and the creation of wealth. And I said, look, I'm going to make sure that I make a lot of money so that I can hire you guys and get you off the streets. And so, I mean, I would tell him that, and so it kind of made him mad. But I'm just saying, it just gave me an understanding of what that really means in our community. And so, the objectives of Angeles is really critical to the creation of an ecosystem that really invests in great ideas and innovation for the betterment of not necessarily our community, yes, but the betterment of America, for our country. And so that's why I dedicate myself to LBAN, that both of you are very familiar with, and the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative, so that we can create wealth, we can create jobs, and we can create leaders. We need to invest in the drivers of what makes this economy in the U.S. great, and that is Latino entrepreneurs. So I have invested in VC and angel type products for the last 10 years, some with good success, some not. But that's what you get when you invest. But the good thing is that we are empowering Latino entrepreneurs, and that's the good thing. And so we have to continue to create this big gap of capital that exists for Latino entrepreneurs. And it's just, it's an imperative for our country. It's an imperative for ourselves. And so thanks to Angeles Investors and Alumni Society for just putting a bright light on this really tremendous opportunity.
I love what you were saying about, that encounter that you had and you becoming a sellout. I think for my dad too, who had a similar story to Hernan, he put himself through law school by having to, clean the toilets, but not as fancy as Harvard, but La UNAM in Mexico. So he would get even less than that minimum wage in the US to be able to do that and put himself through college. But for him, being a kid from the border who came from absolutely nothing, he was certainly not middle class. He had a big sense of guilt for having wealth. He did incredibly well in his career as an attorney later on, and he always thought that he disliked people with money. He was very clear to us that people with money, esos nuevos ricos, like he had these terms for people with money that it made him very uncomfortable. So when he did well in his career, to your point, Victor, I always tell people, if money makes you uncomfortable, you could always follow what my dad did. He started a foundation 30 years ago in Mexico, and till the day he died, he left every last cent to the community. So he did well, but I felt like he wanted to wash his hands, even from his hard work as an attorney, to just give it back. So that's always a possibility, but it's a lot of our upbringing. I remember my abuelita saying, el dinero es el diablo. There's all those dichos, to your point, a las mujeres ni todo el dinero, ni todo el amor. There's so much there of like, if you're rich, if you have money, you're going to become a horrible person. So I think it starts there. Even when I talk to a lot of Latinas when it comes to equal pay, I have a hard time thinking that it's only the U.S. corporations. I'm not saying they need to reassess how we are paid, but I have a hard time of thinking that somebody wakes up saying, how do we pay Latinas a lot less than every other woman? I think a lot is on the structure, but I think a lot is on our upbringing, on the immigrant mentality. Calladita te ves más bonita. Keep your head down. Work hard. Don't, be grateful for what you're given. I think all of those are amazing values that we have in our communities as Latinos. But for the next generation, it's not that serving. We need to teach our girls, our boys from the next generation that their voice matters, that they need to be paid equitably, that they need to ask for what is fair. So I think a lot of the stuff that we learned from all of our Angeles growing up in our families is amazing. But when it came to wealth creation, there are things that we should be doing differently for the next generation. So I'd love to hear more, Hernan, because I know your mom took you to that bank at age 7 or 8. What else did you learn from your parents when it comes to wealth creation and wealth building that you've continued to practice, or that you just learned on your own that you think could be something good for our audience to think about?
Perfect. Well, look, I'll start with something that my dearest friend Victor said. Look, financial wealth does not mean well-being, period. And in fact, at very high levels of financial wealth, well-being goes down. So if you don't have health and peace, joy, meaning, love, relationships, you don't need money. But assume you have those. Financial wealth does create degrees of freedom, and having no money creates a lot of problems. And I do believe that there is this sellout guilt that we need to take out. It's perfectly fine to make money. Sellout is using the money inappropriately. But if you make money and you still instill values in your children, you can leave them money. And if you make money and you give it in part to society to power your community, you're no sellout, right? What I learned, interestingly, a lot of financial advisors love to diversify. What I learned is you have to concentrate to create wealth. You can diversify to retain the wealth, but nobody gets rich diversifying. So what have I seen in my life? I have seen entrepreneurs sell their companies and become very wealthy. How did they concentrate? They put everything they had into their company and sold it. In my case, I spent 25 years doing the same thing. I got pretty good at it. I got paid well for it. My mom had taught me how to save. I saved a lot of money by concentrating. And by the way, how did I invest it? Not in a fund of funds, right? I concentrated because I wanted my wealth to create more wealth. In fact, my favorite advisor in the world says the following: if you have $1 million, you can't pick more than 4 stocks. It's an interesting statement, right? It basically says if you want to create wealth, concentrate. By the way, Victor was talking about funding entrepreneurs. That's a magnificent way to concentrate, right? Put your money behind 2 or 3 people that you believe are going to hit it big with their business. And if you are one of their funders, you're going to make money. So, so lesson 1, money does not equal happiness, right? Lesson 2, that said, money is very helpful. But make sure that if you have it, give it away too. And by the way, you'll improve your happiness. Number 3, if you want to create wealth, you have to concentrate, right? Diversification is for those that have already created wealth. The other thing that I was going to say is, and maybe you're heading here, Beatriz, but people always ask, like, what do you do from a multi-generational perspective, right? And I say, multi-generational is not so much about money. Multi-generational is about values and education. We all know rich grandparents that have poor grandchildren. All of us know those stories, right? If you don't raise your family with the right values, the right education, and you leave them money, you create a problem. Now, can you, outside of that, if you educate them with the right values, then it's absolutely wonderful, right? To leave multi-generational money. And I do think our society, Latinos, right, we have an aversion to the pride of actually making money. I'm going to go back to my college days. What did I say in your first question? I said the Protestant work ethic was extraordinary. Working hard and making money was a celebration. It was not a sellout. I think we need that as part of our culture because we deserve, we have amazing entrepreneurs in this country. They deserve to be funded. They deserve to actually have financial wealth.
I agree with you. And I think that, it's so interesting talking about feeling that guilt of having money, which we've all had it. But that is one of the things we don't want to continue to instill in our kids by any means. And I do think that it is the time to invest in our communities. I think for a lot of people in our community, they absolutely think that, investing is only for millionaires or billionaires, and it's not, right? Even if you don't have that $1 million, there's never been a moment where democratization of who gets to be an investor is open to everyone. So for people who are not those accredited investors and have that $1 million in net worth, there's tremendous opportunities. Like I said at the beginning of this charla, of invest in the companies that you already love, right? Start small, invest in what products you're already using. I tell parents also, like, if you're going to buy your kid 4 presents for Christmas, maybe buy them 2, and the other 2 put it in, in stocks in a company that he or she loves, and then teach them about being a shareholder. Change that mentality from a very early age. Or yes, we go to Disneyland and we get on the rides, but you're also an owner in this company. So all those overpriced churros, at least they're going back into your investment that you're making. But I think that chip that we didn't grow up with, we really need to instill. And for the people on the call who do have that net worth and can invest in bigger investments, absolutely. I think that investing in our community, we know from the LBAN and the Stanford Latino program, how Latinos are the most entrepreneurial cohort. We are the ones launching the most companies in this country, primarily Latinas, but we are still the ones that get the least amount of capital. So I'm so sorry. It's my dog. Somebody opened the door and I apologize. I have all these signs like silence, but I'm in a multi-generational Latino household. No, I'm in a multi-generational Latino household, including my dog. I could totally lost my train of thought, but yes, we were talking about investing and how we should be going from being consumers to owners. So let's go into the people who do have the net worth to be investors. And we know net worth means, obviously, to be an accredited investor, $1 million, not including your primary home. So it's not for everybody. It is risky to invest in startups because it could be incredibly rewarding. Obviously, the higher risk, the higher the reward could be. But there's also a sense of a lot of pride when you are investing in Latino-led companies, right? So it's not charity. It's not like you're giving it away to other Latinos, but you potentially have a big return. So your own thoughts, and I know you both are, I know you said you are an investor in early stage startups, Victor. I'm an angel in a lot of early stage startups, but I'm an entrepreneur myself. So I raise capital, and I have a lot of pride that in my current company, it is primarily Latino owned. With my investors, I made that decision. When I say building wealth juntos as my slogan, it includes my cap table. So I'm very proud of that fact. But what are your thoughts on using early stage startups as a way to building generational wealth? And we said, yes, generational wealth should be primarily focused on values. But when it comes to our previous generations that we saw that we were our parents' 401ks because they didn't plan for their retirement future, how do we as a different generation try to catch up? Maybe is investing in startups a way, or what other ways have you found to be successful as you think about your legacy with your own families?
Well, look, I'll speak for myself. I think, I had the opportunity to create wealth with service on the corporate board for a long time and just doing well at my business. And so for me, it has been taking some of my disposable assets and doing what Hernan said, and that is to really focus. And so I've taken some of that. The diversification strategy is taking some of that and focusing it directly, and some not. But I've decided that investing in Latino businesses is where my heart is, because I trust their stories. I know that they're hungry. I know that they're out there to create, sort of the next generation for themselves. So I feel very comfortable, and that's why I know that some of it is not going to go well, and I think some of it will, and that's going to make up for everything. So yeah, it is a risk. It is a risk, but I feel so much better just personally about investing in what I think is the future of this country. And, so this whole multi-generational thing is that, I from my parents, I got lots of the ganas and the foundation. And I'm at a point now where I need to just provide another foundation for my own children and my grandchildren. And so I'm willing to take that risk. And I may leave them nothing, but if anything, the stories about what happens and what is going on. So I guess I'm a little bit more of a risk taker than others might be, but I believe strongly that if we don't lead by example, that others are not going to either. And we have enough influence, whether it's you, Beatriz, Hernan, or others on this phone call, that we have access to capital sources, to influential people. And so that we have to be the example for them so that they take those risks with us and not just by ourselves. So that's why Angeles is really important, because we need to leverage what Angeles puts together with others, that they see the story about the wealth creation for our country and this community that's going to drive that.
Yeah, I love that. And I remember what I wanted to say before my dog started barking, Hernan, just to comment on what you said about that work ethic and making money that was celebrated in our communities. You know, this society is self before others. That is what is taught. Being independent is applauded. In our communities, it's others before self. So I think that part that we have as like, no, it's because I need to give away what I have in order to be a good Latino, a good family member. I think you're able to sort of balance that guilt out, Victor, with what you are saying, but I am still investing in my community, right? And you can potentially have an incredible payout there that you're able to leave that generational wealth for your family. And if you didn't, you still followed your beliefs. You still followed the traditions and everything that was instilled in you to give back to the community. So I'm right there with you as a big risk taker and invest in our communities no matter what. And, you know, you might come up incredibly well with a unicorn exit and you might not, but it's going to feel really good that you were able to do that. And you're setting an incredible example, I think, to the next generation. But what are your thoughts, Hernan, and what kind of investor are you? What's your profile as far as risk?
Well, first of all, I think you're right in saying, look, this is an asset category that has very specific behavior. It's more risky. A lot of things may produce zero. Some of them may become unicorns. It's low liquidity, etc. Should people invest in that as a way to buy a house? No, right? You save differently to buy your house. You save differently to save for the education of your children, right? I mean, I think it's really important to step back and say, what are my goals? How much wealth do I want to generate? How much of that do I want to put in living? How much do I want to put in education? How much do I want to put in retirement? And so some of the more conservative categories where you don't want to take risks, this is not a good asset class. But when you have investment money, and Victor was talking about it, I happen to have some too, it is a very interesting asset class. Now, how do I think about it? First of all, would I ever invest uninformed or blind? No. God forbid. Why? Because it's like buying a lottery ticket, and buying a lottery ticket and winning is very hard. But what if you're informed? What if you, because you're investing in things you can relate to? You were saying, Beatriz, buy the stuff that you buy, right? So I love investing behind entrepreneurs, but I look at four things. I look at the market. Do I think that this is something that society needs and will continue to need? I look at the strategy of the company. Do I think that they are filling a market niche that the rest of the market is not? I look at the financials, right? I'm no wizard, but is it a reasonably stable asset? But most important, I look at the team. And when I look at somebody that I say, look, this is a winner, well, that's when I invest, because and do all of them become wins? No, but the blended nature of the portfolio has very high returns. And I do love the asset class that is Latino-owned businesses. And I love it for the following reason. As both of you have said, Latinos are the most entrepreneurial group in the US, the largest economy in the world. They are starting businesses faster than any other demographic. They are not being funded enough. which means, and by the ones that have been funded have a very nice scaling curve. So the market is not working. Like literally, we have found that piece of the market that is not working, probably for supply and demand reasons. Latinos don't know how to ask for the funding. The market doesn't know how to provide that funding. And for us Latinos who can actually make those connections, we have found a discontinuity in the market where we can probably make excess returns. And that's why I love this investing in Latino-owned businesses, because the opportunities are there. The banks, for some reason, have not seen them, or the venture capitalists, or don't get comfortable around it. And the opportunity is there, but we can, because we understand the culture, we can speak the language, we can get to know the team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think if you're an accredited investor, absolutely. Jump in with that part of your portfolio that has to go into that higher risk, lower liquidity, higher return scenario.
Perfect. And obviously, Angeles is an incredible way to do that. I'm a part of their network, and I love what they stand for. I think we all are. So it's time for Q&A. Time flies when you're having fun. I have a few questions from the audience that have been sent to us. One is literally just something that we talked about as far as being called ambicioso in Spanish as a negative thing, and obviously in English to be ambitious is something positive. So we talked a little bit about that and how to come to terms with that. There's one question that is more related on the nonprofit side. It's from Mercedes Enrique, and she says, what if you pull all your wealth together and start a foundation with those funds, and then the foundation will go on for years and provide funds to causes that you like? That's different than investing as far as making a higher return. You make a return emotionally for sure. That is exactly what my father did. He left absolutely zero to the family, which I encouraged him to do, because what he really wanted to do was to leave it to the foundation. And that will go on forever to fund Latino kids for higher education. So that's definitely a consideration. You have to have the wealth to put it there and for it to go on forever and invest a certain amount every year. You can invest in even in startups as a foundation, but as a way to go back to your nonprofit. So that's a different thing, but definitely something that's doable. Here's a question as what other asset classes do you both like to invest in? Or anybody who wants to take it.
And a lover of U.S. stocks, blue chip stocks. First, I understand them, and I see millions of people buying them, and so I like to buy individual stocks, and I hold them for an incredibly long period of time. So I ride all of the ups and downs, and when the market becomes fearful, like right now, or during the time of COVID, in 2008, and the price goes down, I buy more. And it has been an exceptional return. But you have to have amazing patience, the discipline to buy when everyone else is fearful, and take a little risk. Now, private alternatives, bonds have been very unexciting until recently, right? We have now some interest rates, may or may not keep up with inflation, but that has been an interesting category. Private debt, private alternatives is interesting, but the last one is angels, right? Is money behind entrepreneurs, and those are basically the categories that I'm in. Probably similar to you, Victor. What about you?
So I'm kind of like you. I try to avoid a lot of specialized equity investments because they'll throw international at you, and I just don't understand as much about that, but I do understand U.S. stocks. I'm like you. I'd really focus in on U.S. stocks, and I really try not to touch any of that unless there's incredible corrections that you have to maybe do something in terms of maybe buying more. But I also like to look at some other sort of private equity kind of investments, which would be alternatives. And that all fits in with what we're talking about, whether it's venture or private equity. And so I will do some select picks there, but that's what I like doing. But all in all, I mean, I call Hernan for all my investment advice.
Hernan, pues I'm gonna call you also, amigo. I'm like, here I am on the phone. I promise not. I promise not to bother you. We have 2 more questions, and we have like 8 minutes left. So hopefully we're gonna get to them. This is from Rocio, and she wants to know, what is your advice to those working to acquire that accredited investor status? What kind of experiences should they look for, or mindset to develop in order to take on that level of responsibility when it's arrived? Anybody? Oh, Hernan, I think you're on mute.
Okay. One part of being an accredited investor is defined by law, right? It's defined by your net worth in investable assets is worth more than X. So that's the way to become an accredited investor. Now, to become an accredited investor doesn't mean you're a good one. So, what would make you a good one? Look, I don't like to follow trends, because everyone follows trends and the market clears, and therefore you're not going to make excess returns. I like to invest in things that I understand. You heard Victor, you heard Beatriz. You're hearing things that say, if you understand it, then you can assess whether it's good or bad, etc. And so, but if you're going to be in the investment game as an accredited investor, my biggest advice is learn every day. Learn every day. This is an experience curve thing. Nobody is born a good investor. We all learn how to be good investors. And we learn to be good investors by seeing bets that work and bets that don't work. Now, it's expensive if all the bets you learn from are yours. So learn from other people's bets. It's happening all around you. Your friends are investing, your parents' friends are investing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Take a look at them. Ask lots of questions. Why did you make that decision? How did it play out? What are the patterns that you can tell? I mean, I've learned a few rules, right? If I'm going to back an entrepreneur, they have a lot of money in their venture, and it's 100% of their time. Why? Because when I funded entrepreneurs that were, 50% of their time, there was not enough commitment to make it happen. But, there's some lessons you'll learn by talking to me, but you'll learn more by just asking around. And so I say, build your own experience curve of what works and what doesn't in the market.
Yeah, I agree with you, Hernan, about asking questions. Look, I talked to a lot of people, and I got very comfortable, for example, when I made a choice on an investment advisor for myself. Someone that I absolutely trust with my life, and that I know that, she's not going to do me wrong in any sense of the word, and she's going to help me stay patient in those downtimes. And somebody that's just not looking to drive fees. I mean, you have to really look at what that means. And she happens to be Latina, and I love her to death. And so I get a lot of advice, and that gives me the confidence to then go ask other people in this ecosystem for advice. And so, and get all kinds of information from different asset sources so that you get a good sense for what's going on in the market. And so anyway, to me, that's really part of the growth of an accredited investor. So that's my take.
Perfect. And if you're not an accredited investor yet, but you do want to start dipping your feet a little bit into investing in Latino-led organizations, there's a lot of crowdfunding platforms available where you're able to invest even $5 in startups that you really believe in and that you love. So definitely look into that. Republic is one that I like that has a great Latina leading the charge there. So you're able to, a lot of unaccredited investors can pull in their money and then invest as one in these higher risk startups. So that's something that you can take a look at and not have to wait the whole idea behind being a credit investor is that you're not going to lose everything that you own making an investment where you're not at the level of wealth that you should be comfortable with making an investment that might not pan out the way you wanted. But you can start small and you can start learning, just like Hernan and Victor said. We have only a couple more minutes, 3 to be precise, and we still have parting words later on from Jorge. So just one quick minute, Victor, Hernan, you've both been incredible with giving such incredible advice, but 1 minute of final thoughts on this whole wealth building journey for our community, what would that be?
I'll just start by saying, look, we talked about what's really important on this wealth building journey. It's less about specifics, but more about philosophy, and it's really values driven. I mean, everything that motivates me, that motivates you all, is really what you have learned and what drives you and becoming better people. And so to me, that's the most important thing. The second thing is what Hernan said earlier, that is, what are your goals? What do you want to do? And in that is not only sort of financial metrics, but what do you want to do to impact your life and to impact others' lives? So to me, that's the second most important thing, is just to have the right goals, the mix that's going to make you a happier person and a more effective person.
I would say that, first of all, I agree with Victor. He is a sage, and I spend a lot of time getting his sage advice, including today. But what I would say is spend all of your time and energy at the intersection of your talents and your passions.
I love that.
When you spend all of your time there, you will be rewarded for it, and you can reinvest that reward. And when you invest where you have talent and you're passionate about it, and you will not go wrong.
Talent and passion. What an amazing way to close this session. Thank you so much, both Hernan and Victor, for your incredibly generous time and wisdom. And I will throw it back to Jorge. Thank you so much for having us.
And thank you, Beatriz, Victor, Hernan, for the great conversation. On behalf of Angeles, we thank you for sharing your life stories, your knowledge, and your advice for wealth creation. And also thanks to the Alumni Society for being such a great partner. We're doing great work, and I'm so excited to see what comes next for the next episode in the wealth creation series. I just want to take a moment to mention, Pedro mentioned this. There's a lot of synergies with everything you heard today, all the organizations that came together. We Angeles were on a mission to find, fund, and grow the most promising Hispanic and Latinx ventures. Today, we're 100 plus members strong, accredited investors that are in a position to deploy the capital in startups. And we've also launched a new associate level membership for unaccredited investors to become educated while they're building their wealth, that they come out, see the pitches, network with other members. So once they are in our position to deploy capital, they're ready. So if anything you heard today interests you, if you want to come out and meet us at any of our different networking events that we have, you want to come out to visit one of our pitch nights, please feel free to reach out to us at members@angelinvestors.com, and Dalia, our membership lead, will be in contact with you. So those were the quick parting words I wanted to give on behalf of Angeles investors. And for everybody in the audience, I want to thank you for investing your time, your energy, your attention today, and uplifting the voices of the Hispanic community as you've done today. And I hope that you continue to do so. With that, thank you, and to the future.